Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Photographing Churchill's Polar Bears, Part 2, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader, Julia Ciampini. Now, Julia has been a professional photographer since 2009 and a photography teacher since 2011, instructing at institutions including Vancouver College of Art and Design and North Island College, while leading photography expeditions across 17 countries on 5 continents since 2019. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences from the University of Toronto, a Master's of Science in Education from Dieuville University, and a Master of Fine Arts in Documentary Photography and Film from Ryerson University. Julia combines her scientific background with extensive photography expertise and an adventurous spirit, having explored 20 of Canada's national parks and marine conservation areas while completing multiple cross-country expeditions. In fact, it seems like, Julia, you're never at home. So, thanks for joining us for this few minutes today. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Rob. That's wonderful. I definitely am not home that often, but I love every second of it. Rob and I were just talking about how wonderful it is to be able to put your energy towards something that you care about, and this is definitely it. So today I'm going to be continuing on where I left off last time around. We're going to talk all about capturing polar bear photography in Churchill, Manitoba. And I'm going to dive in because I didn't do the greatest job last time in keeping the presentation to an hour. Got a lot to say about the subject. So before I begin with the photography portion, I do want to talk about the fact that your cell phone as a camera is a very, very powerful tool. I got the impression last time that there was a few guests who were concerned that they were coming to Churchill without a professional camera and concerned that they should buy a new camera as a result. And I think you can get absolutely breathtaking, beautiful images and document the story of your trip very well with your cell phone, especially if that's your camera of choice. The cell phone can be a really powerful tool, and it can be a very convenient one for travel programs. And when I'm on the expedition ships that I work on, what I'm finding is more and more photographers are coming in with their cell phone as their primary camera. So for me personally, I'm definitely a DSLR mirrorless type of photographer, but I do find there is a range of individuals who come onto our trip. The range of skills is very broad. The range of desires is very broad. So wherever you come on that range, you will have a wonderful time in Churchill, witnessing the incredible polar bears and that whole northern spirit in action. So I do want to, before I begin to talk about bears generally and photographing Churchill generally, I want to give a few photo-specific tips for cell phone users, because I find even the larger camera users will still use their cell phones for wide shots or storytelling or behind-the-scene kind of shots. So I'll give you a few tips and tricks for your cell phone photography, and then we'll dive into specifics about bears and the town of Churchill itself. So one of the things that you can do as a photographer with your cell phone is really dial in a specific point of focus and a specific exposure, how dark or how light your image is. To master focus with your cell phone, it is as simple as like raising your camera and like pointing towards your subject, and with your finger pressing on the screen where you want the point of sharpest focus. And the thing about that is the human eye will always gravitate to that point of sharpest focus. So you as a photographer can pinpoint the exact point that you want to draw your viewer's attention to by physically tapping on your screen. And you'll notice with an iPhone, if you tap on the screen, you'll get a little yellow box. That's saying this part of the frame is sharp and in focus. And with an Android, it's the exact same thing, but you'll get a little yellow circle instead. So that would be the first small tip that I would give you when you're using your cell phone. You see a bear, an animal, a person in the field. Take a moment and find the point that you want to be sharpest and focus and tap on your screen in that point. With wildlife or portraits or bird photography, one of the places that I'm always tapping is the eyes. If I have something in my frame, this is the same thing with moving your autofocus points to a place in your subject or in your field of view. But the eyes are such a nice point of connection, and you can look at any image, and if everything about that image is out of focus but the eyes of your subject, you'll still feel that pull, that point of connection to your subject. So taking a second and pointing towards the eye with that focusing mechanism is a wonderful thing that you can do. So you'll also notice once you've done this, you've tapped on the screen, you see that yellow box. You'll also notice this line with a small sun beside that. This actually helps you control your exposure, how dark or how light your image will appear. So what you can do is after you tap on that screen, you can put your finger on that sun and drag that up and drag that down. And I recommend you get your phone out, give that a try. And dragging it might be a little bit of like you're physically moving your finger over the sun. It might not move drastically, but by moving your finger over that sun, you'll end up brightening or darkening the scene. And this gives you a little bit more control in tricky lighting situations. So here's an example of that idea. Here's a photograph of a flower, and in one case, the photographer, added light to the scene with this motion, and in the other case, they took away light from the scene, making it appear darker. So in one case, you have a little bit of a brighter, moodier image, in the other, you have a brighter, lighter image, and in the other, you have a darker, more moody image. So the other tip that I have for our cell phone users is if you look to the front of your camera, you're going to see a whole bunch of different lenses. And now you might see 1 or 2 or 3, even 5 different lenses. And each of these represents a different lens to see your subject with. They actually toggle a different lens. It's almost like the photographers with the larger cameras interchanging their lenses. This is what you can do with your cell phone camera. So what I'm noticing now with a lot of cell phone cameras is they're marketing like 5, 6, 7, so many different cameras, but as much as this is a joke, it's a great idea to use the different lenses because each of them will see the frame differently. So where would you find your lenses? How do you get to your lenses? How do you change from one to the next? If you go to your regular camera, on top of where you would choose your between photo and video and portrait and all of that, you'll see these circles, these 0.5, 1 times, 2 times, maybe 3 or 10 times. Each of these circles connects to a different lens, and by touching those circles, you're toggling a different lens to use. So when I was on one of the expedition ships, I decided to do a little test. What kind of image can I take just by sitting with my camera like this and toggling between the different lenses? We're on a zodiac. You can see an iceberg, 2 different zodiacs in the field of view. And the zodiac that I'm sitting on isn't moving at all. So I toggled between a wide angle perspective. You're filling the scene from side to side. It's broad, it's wide. You can see the environment that you're in. And this would be your 0.5 or 0.6 if you're on an Android. And then I decided to toggle to the 1 times. And the 1 times lens mimics how the human eye would see. It doesn't distort the frame. It very much is akin to human vision. And so you see this natural narrowing of the frame. And it appears as though that iceberg is coming closer to us compared to the previous. We're not actually moving. That's just the optical principles of these lenses changing. When you go from wide lenses to telephoto, very pulled-in lenses, you have this compression of the scene from front to back. So a wider lens will extend the scene, and a longer lens, a telephoto lens, will compress the scene. So it looks like we're getting closer to the iceberg. As we go even longer with our telephoto lens, this is our 2 to 3 times, we're pulling into the scene. We've lost track of the size of our frame. It's a tighter composition. And so we're starting to see a little bit more of the detail of the iceberg at the expense of the width of view. And as we go even tighter, we've lost every sense of context. We just have this more abstract vision. This is our telephoto, our 10 times. So you on the rovers, you in Churchill, you can use the different lenses to tell different parts of your story. And so when you come back home, you have much more of a holistic representation of what you did. And all it is just changing between the different lenses to show, maybe a wide angle perspective or a tight point of view. So the other thing you might encounter when in Churchill is there's always a small possibility in the polar bear season, but a possibility of northern lights. And the team, with safety first, of course, will do everything in their power to make that an option. If you're on the lodge, you're in a good place, because if there is northern lights, all you have to do is step on into that middle piece and just view the northern lights, and you can stay as late as you like. But if you're in town and we're on the ground viewing the northern lights, there's a whole safety procedure that comes in before that. But I digress. Back to the photography. These cell phone cameras are phenomenal. I am so surprised at capturing northern lights. There is a mode, it's called your night mode. It will happen automatically if your camera senses that you are in dark enough conditions. And so the icon for your night mode looks like a little moon with lines. Let me see if I have. Yeah. So here's an example of the icon that you might see. On the lower right corner, you see this moon with some lines and 3 seconds. And that's saying, I'm going to hold the camera for 3 seconds. The camera is going to, it actually takes a whole bunch of images and kind of stacks them together for you. So your job as a photographer is to stay as steady as you can stay during that time. And I would say that if you can, like a lot of photographers will extend their arms out and hold their cameras up. The problem with that is you introduce a little bit of shake into your cameras. If you can arms in, hold your cameras tight to your side, you're going to be a more steady platform. So your night mode will happen automatically if you have a more modern camera, more modern phone. The other thing I would recommend for any kind of northern lights photography is to turn off your flash. This will ensure that your photos aren't ruined and the photos of all the people around you are not ruined. So we want to minimize as much as possible any excess light in the scene. We want dark conditions because this low light phenomenon is very hard to capture if there's more bright light dominating the scene. So flash off, night mode on, and I would also recommend live mode gets turned off. And that's that other, almost looks like a bullseye there. And so you want that line through the bullseye. To turn it off, you just click on it, click, and it will turn on or off depending on where you are. So both Android and iPhone have this night mode, and you'll get, compared to where cell phones were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'll get incredible pictures of northern lights with your cell phone. The other thing, and then one or two little tips for your cell phone photography that I want to recommend. One of them is called burst mode. And this is a great way to take pictures of anything that's in your scene that's happening really quickly, moving quickly in front of you, and you want to capture a key moment in that action. So you're thinking of like a wildlife moving, birds moving, people moving. You want to capture a peak expressive moment. Your burst mode can help you with that. Now, different cameras do burst mode differently. For newer Mac phones, you would go to your camera settings, that shutter button where you would click to take your picture, you would just gently pull it to the left. And if it sounds like a machine gun's going off, that means you're taking a lot of pictures in quick succession and you've done burst mode. From there, you would choose the frame that you like to use, but it ensures that you've caught a little bit more of the motion in front of you, and you can then choose the frame that works best for you. On older iPhone models, you might have to press and hold that shutter. And for Android shooters, I'm an Android shooter myself. What I have to do is hold the shutter and pull down. And it's a finicky touch, I will say, depending on the make and model of your phone. Everyone's phone does it differently. What I really recommend before you come to Churchill is take 20 minutes on YouTube, search your specific phone model, you know, iPhone 11 Plus, I don't know what your phone model is, search for your specific phone model and photography tips. It's a really great idea. It won't take too long, but then you'll come out with some better sense of how your particular phone works well. And then you can practice with those new techniques all week in Churchill. The final iPhone smartphone tip that I'd like to give is this idea of, if you're shooting a video in front of you, some of the newer phones will also allow you to take pictures as you're shooting a video. So what you would do here is you would go to your video mode, you would start recording a video, and if you notice another shutter on your screen, this little white circular button with a circle around it, that's your shutter button, that's what you would press to take a picture. If you notice that come up on your screen anywhere, that's enabling you to be able to take a picture as you're taking a video. This is great if you have this wonderful moment of a bear beside your rover and you want both a video to show your friends and family and maybe a nice still shot as well. The one downside here is the quality of the image is less than it would be if you were taking just a straight photograph, no video, but the upside is you get both video and image. So as a final note with our cell phones, I do recommend you favorite your favorite images. This will make it much easier to find those images when you're ready to share. And I'll talk about our photo sharing platform after this. The other part of that is, in your search area, you can actually search for particular images. I noticed that when I'm out and I want to share something with a friend or family, I have thousands and thousands of images on my phone. It's so easy to get lost. But if I go to my albums, there's a search bar and I can type in polar bear, I can type in pizza, I can type in dog, anything, and my phone will search through all the images that I have saved on my phone and bring up those specific shots. So with the favorites album and that search bar, it becomes a little bit easier for you to find the images that you love so you can share them with the people that you care about. So now I'm going to talk about some general techniques for capturing beautiful images of polar bears in Churchill. And I referenced some of this stuff last time. I talked about shutter speed, fast shutter speed, and slow shutter speed. If you want to capture frozen motion, you want to use a faster shutter speed. And if you want more of an ethereal blur, capturing the flow and the feeling of movement, you would slow down your shutter speed. And I put this on last week as a general guideline for people. I get often asked, where should my shutter speed be? And I think that depends on what's going on in front of you. It depends on how long your lens is, how fast the motion is, how steady you are, and what your intent is. But generally, this will give you a little bit of a guideline. So if you want to take a screen grab of the screen here, please do so. Essentially, what I would like to also express is I've recently created a Substack, which is essentially a newsletter where I dive in deeply to topics about photography and, for example, what shutter speeds should you photograph bears in, tell me the behavior about sparring bears, and let's learn about what we would see in the field, and kind of dive more deeply in these topics in more of a written form. And I just started it last week. It's been lovely. But I'll send a link out to that. My intent is throughout this season, I'm going to be sharing photo tips from the field. And then if you're also in the field, you would get an email with a few photo tips, and then you can go out and try them, and hopefully one or two stick, and you can incorporate them into your own photographic practice. But here's a general guideline for camera settings. The faster the action, the faster your shutter speed if you want to freeze the action. And then as you slow the action down, you start to introduce a little bit more blur and creativity in the motion that you see in your frame. So this is that Substack that I was just mentioning, essentially substack.com @Julia-Ciampini. Feel free to follow if you like. It will be primarily photography, nature, wildlife, and creativity. That's kind of where I'm at, and I'll do articles about all the places that I work in, Churchill being a very important part of that. So back to this. So I mentioned also last week that a lot of photographers will approach wildlife with a shallow depth of field, which is a great technique. So you're shooting at, f4, for example, f2.8 if your lens allows. This allows you to make the eyes of the animal sharp and then blur the background behind the animal, directing your attention more to the animal. But I would say be cautious about too shallow a depth of field as you start to maybe lose focus in the nose or the ears, and you might want to have those two parts of the bear in focus. So f5.6, f8 becomes a really nice point where you can capture the whole face of the bear in nice sharp detail, but still throw out the background in a very pleasing way. And I mentioned with our fingers, we can tap the cell phone where we want to focus. With our larger cameras, we have autofocus points that we can manipulate and move around our frame, and then we can compose our image in really interesting ways, and then ensure that the thing that we care about is sharp by putting our autofocus point on that thing. So personally, I enjoy a single point autofocus or a very small group of autofocus points if there is faster motion. And the reason I like it is because it is ideal for locking on a particular part of the scene and capturing, sharp eyes or sharp facial features. I find extremely appealing. And I would also recommend for our camera users the continuous autofocus. For Canon, it's called AI Servo. For Nikon or Sony, it's AFC. And essentially, this type of autofocus system will keep moving subjects tracked well, and so you won't keep losing the focus set on your moving target. There's another type of autofocus point, which is for stationary subjects, and I would say with the movement of the bears and the movement within your scene, continuous autofocus will lead to more success for you. So just like our cell phone, we can capture burst mode, and burst mode on our larger cameras, you can capture multiple frames per second. Anytime that I sense there's some key action going to happen, I will take a second and change the frames per second on my camera to a higher burst rate. And that way I can capture more of a key moment within the scene. So what that might look like is, you might be photographing a bear in the tundra, and then all of a sudden another bear will approach from the side with curiosity. There's something going to happen. There's some interaction at play there. If I stay at a slower burst mode, wonderful. I'll still get great photographs, but I might miss that key moment where, bear swiping, snow is bursting. It's really a high energy shot. So I'm kind of watching the movement in the frame in front of me and deciding, is this a movement? Is this motion one that I want to capture in this way? A lot of bears we will see out in the tundra will be sleeping and lying down and conserving energy. They are fasting at this point of the season. They're not they're not, you know, going to want to waste a lot of energy when they haven't eaten for 4 months, or in the case of, you know, pregnant females, it will be 8 months by the time they've left the ice and are back on feeding. And so you'll see sleeping bears in the willows, and sleeping bears are beautiful to photograph, but anticipate that willows can be interesting to shoot through, and sometimes catching that sharp eye or that sharp point of focus on the bear, sometimes your autofocus point will get confused, and so you just stick with it. You take more shots than you would have to in a more clear circumstance, but it can be a beautiful way to frame your bear as well. Oh, okay. So one of the first articles that I wrote on my Substack was all about sparring bears and the kind of different repetitive behaviors that you can look out for in the field, and the fact that because this behavior is repetitive, they almost go through a similar set of motions. You could then, as a photographer, predict what's going to happen and then anticipate the scene and respond accordingly. So in that first article, I've kind of detailed, based on research that I've been reading and some books I've been reading, some of the interesting behaviors that you'll see. For example, there is a type of biting behavior. It's called the inhibited biting. And so a bear could lock its jaw around another bear's neck and could do considerable damage, and yet doesn't. And so this play fighting, this sparring, isn't, in this time of the year, it isn't meant to be violent or forceful or anything like that. It is, it's a really, really interesting behavior. And I think as a photographer, it is one of the most exciting behaviors to bear witness to and to be able to capture. So being able to kind of anticipate the action that's happening in front of you. And this is where I say the guides that you're going to be with are incredible. The team is incredible. They'll be with you either interpreting behavior as it happens or deconstructing behavior after the fact. Personally, for me, when something's going on, I really appreciate when people have a chance to be in the moment and like just get to observe and watch and be part of whatever's happening. And then afterwards, we can talk about what just happened and share the excitement of that moment. But I think if you're kind of distracted while it's going on, you're missing what is most incredible. So I mentioned the Substack. I mentioned my first article is very much about sparring bears. If you're thinking about how you might want to capture that, I've detailed the biology, and I've detailed some of the photography that you can go into there. And I think, as I mentioned, the high energy of sparring bears is incredible to capture, and you can do so with a slow shutter speed, you can do so with a fast shutter speed. It all depends on what you yourself are after. So another thing that I will recommend for photographers and cell phone photographers as well is if you can turn your camera to a silent mode to reduce noise. It helps avoid disturbing the wildlife, but it also helps every person in your rover get into the moment better. You know, you're not hearing beeping and clicking and all of that. You're in the scene, you're in the nature, you're there, and I think that's an appealing part of it. So a couple things about composition. How you hold your camera can affect the feeling of your scene. Portrait, you know, if your subject is more vertical subject, a standing bear, for example, sparring bears, more vertical. This composition, the portrait, is much more about power. It's much more about that sense of grandeur, whereas a landscape, your eyes go from right to left. There's a peacefulness, there's a harmony, there's a steady stableness to an image that is constructed more horizontally. I would recommend on occasion, placing the bear on a point of intersection for the rule of thirds. I'm sure you've all heard of the rule of thirds. Essentially, you would put a tic-tac-toe like grid on the frame of your image, and your PowerPoints are where these grid lines intersect. So you can put something interesting on those PowerPoints, and it will lead to a more dynamic and interesting composition. And I think it's very important that you compose with the mood of the scene in mind. You allow the scene's emotional qualities to guide how you choose your framing. So, for example, if you want to communicate, maybe solitude or loneliness or this vast, beautiful Arctic landscape, subarctic landscape, you might include a much wider frame and make the subject matter much tinier in the scene. You might come in closer to emphasize, interesting textures. There's a tension there as we get closer. There's an intensity there as we get closer. And then coming, face to face, direct. It is locked eyes. You feel it most emotionally, this one-to-one connection. I think this is one of the just a very powerful moment. Anytime you lock eyes with an animal in this way, and it's wonderful to be able to capture that. And I will say the rovers give you such a wonderful opportunity, even if the bear is a little bit further away. With the way the camera is angled, it almost appears like they're more on the same plane if they're further away and you're using a longer lens, versus if the bear's directly kind of at the side, like underneath your rover, and then you can get the eye contact when they're looking up, but it's a different relationship there. Oh, so one thing I enjoy thinking is that each bear I meet is its own character. And as we look at wildlife photography, when you start to see each bear as an individual, you start to see the different characteristics that each bear has. And you might find goofy bears, you might find really intense bears. There's so many different ways that each bear presents itself, and trying to capture that from each bear becomes a really, really fun challenge. And so as a photographer, no matter what the project that I'm working on, I'll come in beforehand with a shot list, and I'll kind of detail all the different shots that I'm hoping to get throughout a program or a trip. And I use this as a guide to how I choose my lenses and how I choose how I make a lot of the creative decisions before I get to a trip. Now, once you're there, you get what you get. It is what it is. It's nature. You have no control in terms of what you see, when you see, how you see it. Bears will be bears. You put yourself in the right place. You have an idea in mind, but then you're just open to what's in front of you. And so this is kind of a few of the things that I'm looking out for this season. I want to go beyond portraits. I want to, focus really on the expressions, the gestures. Can I find mirrored expressions between bears? I'm really interested in interactions between bears, whether it's mom and cub or sparring males or other dynamics that we may get to see throughout the season. It could be interspecies dynamics, so a polar bear and an Arctic fox. Who knows what every group will get to see. It's really exciting to think about the possibilities. And then I'm very curious to see the landscape as it progresses through the season. Right now, there's a few groups. They're heading up today. I head up tomorrow. And some pictures that I've seen right now are just the most beautiful fall colors, but then reports of also the first gentle snow. So I would say the whole season is really fascinating, because from the start of the season, October 6th, 7th, whatever it is there, the start of the season, to November 15th or so, the end of the season, Churchill will go from much more fall-like to much more winter-like, and in just a short period of time. And so it's going to be so fascinating to see the whole season from that perspective. So as I mentioned, each bear can be its own character, and honing into the characteristics that you can find in each bear will lead to more interesting pictures. And so, you know, bears rolling in a field of flowers or falling in love with random sticks on the tundra, I think it's so endearing. And I think that's one of the reasons we connect to bears, because we can kind of see ourselves or our own behaviors mirrored in them. You know, bears that sit contemplatively looking at the bay as it's freezing. This bear reminded me of a yogi, just sitting there for, you know, I think it was 10-15 minutes, just sitting like a person out looking at the bay. So one of the things I would also recommend for photographers is to look in the direction that the bear is looking or moving, and give some extra room in front of the bear. So there's this implied directionality of movement. We experience the image from left to right. We follow the gaze of the bear. We follow the direction of the wind movement in trees. Giving that little bit of extra lead room will lead to a more pleasing composition. And then one thing I like to think about also with any kind of photography that I do is that every subject has a particular visual weight to pull towards the subject matter. Here it's very clear the subject is this coyote. The visual weight is on this coyote. But this is what I mentioned, leave a little bit of extra room in front of the gaze of the animal, or the direction of movement of the animal. But sorry, what I was saying about the points of interest. If you look at your frame and you consider as you're composing, what are the points of interest in your frame, and how can I arrange them in this frame to make it interesting movements between points of interest. And obviously you can use lines in your frames to lead from one point to the next. But one of the first steps I always recommend to photographers is to almost start in their mind to think of key points in the frame as, you know, it sounds strange, but like here's a small star, okay, and this is a really big key point, so it's a very large star, and this is a smaller supporting point, so it's a small star. So you kind of see your frame as a collection of stars throughout, depending on their visual weights. That's a very strange way to describe something. However, it does work to create more balanced images, because you start to notice, oh, I have a lot of visual interest on one side, I have a lot of stars on this side. Maybe it's being balanced by no visual interest on the other, or maybe I have to do some kind of balancing to make the frame a little bit more harmonious. Just a thought, a technique. So one of the things that you will experience in polar bear season is a lot of incredible details. Please hone in on those details. Don't overlook, you know, paws and claws and wet noses and the textured fur. These can add a lot of storytelling moments and intimacy within your photo stories. So like paws, the paw prints on the snow. You know, you can see every single tiny print of the claw as well on this paw print. And just for comparison, I found this image on the web, and just the size, the sheer size, it's I think a 12-inch diameter, 30 centimeters is the size of a polar bear paw. And obviously we won't be on the ground, but if a polar bear runs through town, you might find paw prints there. And so, you know, that comparison of size. As you're looking and watching polar bears move, one thing to watch out for is how the paws move. Okay, so there's this ideal shot of the polar bear walking where that front paw is almost turned in towards. Look out for that. It's a really nice key movement. And I would also say I recommend that you look at the direction that your bear is coming to you towards. If you can clearly see each limb, you know, it doesn't look like a blob. It looks very distinct. Animal that walks on all fours. You can see each one of the legs. They each have their own space. There's not overlap, that's a really ideal position for the legs. So trying to aim for less of a blob shape in the shape of your bear and much more of a bear shape. You know, we're drawn to shapes. We like easily identified shapes. If you think of this bear as a silhouette, you want to be able to understand that it's a bear just based on its shape and its profile alone. So I think with wildlife photography, I think there's always this drive initially to take a great portrait. And then once you have these great portraits under your belt, I think the drive becomes, well, I want to understand behavior more. And I want to be able to document this bear's behavior. I want to be able to understand what they do, how they live, their life history, and understand it more deeply. And so there's this beautiful quote here, photograph behavior, not just form. An animal standing is a record, an animal doing something is a story. And so you're coming to Churchill, you're going to have a wonderful time in Churchill. But one of the things that you are doing is telling the story of the polar bears today. And so I was in Katmai recently and went to Brooks Falls for a little side adventure, and just watching the bears feed salmon and kind of deconstructing that element of their behavior. So their hunting strategy, their social behavior, their moms and cubs, all the different elements of behavior become this interesting rich fodder. I talked about sparring. Why do bears stand? Why do we see that commonly? What does it mean? So photographing bears standing is interesting, always kind of being ready for those moments. And a lot of this standing bear, this behavior, it's a curiosity driven thing, with the way the bear's face and skull are constructed, with the way their nose is such a powerful sensory organ. By standing, they can see a greater field of view, and they can smell their environment greater in a greater capacity. And so this becomes a curiosity driven thing. What's going on over there? Let me see, let me explore. Another photography tip for your Churchill adventures is try as much as you can to watch the background. If you can have a clear, uncluttered background, it will keep the focus on the bear itself. And anything that you can do to avoid distracting elements will make for stronger pictures. And so something like this, we can see that nose smell driven, curious bear sensing their environment, sensing the pheromones on the other bear's paw prints. If there was a tree in the way or something else in this frame, it's not about this anymore. It's now we have different elements competing with this idea. So looking for gesture, looking for the direction in which a bear's facing, looking for, I always think of this as so strange, but I think of, if I have a few bears, I think of them as synchronized swimmers. And if there's ever any time where the behavior between two bears is synchronized, that's visually interesting. So I want to document that. Moms and cubs, I think, are like to be able to see moms and cubs in their environment, to see moms caring for their cubs, to see the way in which they interact, it's incredible. So kind of deconstructing that, wonderful. The other thing I would like to mention is, as much as there's an inclination to get tight or close or kind of fill the frame with a bear, if you can capture its environment, you are saying a lot in this image. And so here we have a quote by Paul Nicklin, a really famous photographer. He says, "The best wildlife images don't just show an animal, they reveal the world, its world." So as we go through, this is a wonderful picture by one of our expedition leaders, Arthur Campman, and he shows this image of a small bear in a big landscape. So we're getting to see the environment that this bear lives in. This is the ecosystem they're a part of. it's the two are intimately tied together. Here's another example. And so we tell a broader story this way. We incorporate much more of the environment and much more of this, we tell much more about this relationship between animal and its environment. So with our polar bears, this is an image I took in Svalbard, and you see miles and miles of ice and just this tiny bear in its environment. It's a really telling image. If you leave open areas for snow, for sky, for water, or tundra, it evokes this sense of freedom or isolation. And if you are going on the helicopter ride, wonderful. I think it is an incredible experience. I've got to do it a few times, and there's never a time it's not so wonderful to see the tundra from that perspective. So to see sleeping bears, the paw prints all over the landscape. In the summertime, I was able to do the helicopter ride and got to see a herd of caribou, which was incredible. And then, to see the little bear body prints. Sometimes the bears will nook up in the landscape to keep themselves a little bit cooler, don't want to overheat, so they get their body print in the sand. And I think that's such a lovely detail. You'll be in a rover most of the time when you're out on the tundra or on the tundra lodge. Don't put your camera away in what you think is bad weather. This can lead to some of the most evocative and interesting images, whether it's fog or rain or storm clouds. This kind of thing leads to visceral images that your viewers can feel. Water engages our senses. We feel it. The images become much more sensory. And so I look back to some of the images that I took this year that have been my favorite, and there's something about water interacting with the subject matter. It gives this extra layer of interest to our images. So final few points, and then I'll wrap up. The other thing that as a photographer I'm always looking out for is any kind of key emotional shot. The strongest wildlife images, and I do believe this, aren't just about the animal. They're about the emotion and the tension and the story that you can create. And what I'm finding lately is, as photographers, we have a lot of control over our voice and our style. But where our voice and style really shine through, it's not so much the individual image, but it's a few images that you pull together to tell your story, right? It's how you choose those images, which images you've chosen, how they work together in concert with one another to say certain things. And that's where I think our style and voice really shines through. But looking for these moments of tenderness, for example, in unexpected moments of tenderness, and it's this intimacy. This moment happened in a really strange way. It was the very last day of last season, very last tundra that was out, and we had a mom and cubs on one side and another mom and a cubs on the other side. And I've never had that experience before. It's wonderful to get to see a mom and cubs, period, but then to have two simultaneously. And so it was a matter of, taking a moment, slowing down, seeing what's in front of you. And this moment where they were touching one another and kind of connected in this nice framing lasted 2 seconds. But it's one of my favorites from previous season. So these moments where bears look, you can read the expression in the moment, in expressions off their faces. It's incredible. So I will also say that if you are having a great bear day, you're seeing a lot of things, I would say practice skills that you're not really comfortable with. Get out of your comfort zone after you've gotten the shots that you want. It doesn't make sense to just take 1,000 of the same shot. Take 100, get the great one that you want, and then after you got that shot, explore different things that you can do as a photographer to broaden your approach. And if you have less of a great bear day, meaning you're not necessarily seeing, bears frequently, take the time to practice your skills so that when something great happens, you're ready. You've had more time to practice. Anytime there's a lull, and I have a photo program, let's work on a skill. Let's figure something else out. Let's answer some questions you might have. Let's pass the plateau that we all get to. And I always think of this quote as as fishermen, we mend our nets in the winter so that when summer comes, we are ready. So you are going to be in Churchill. I hope that you capture the entire story, from the interesting interactions that you and your group members will have with maybe the dogs at the dog yard, or the dog yard is a wonderful place to take some pictures, and all your guest companions. I think it's a really lovely thing to do, to be able to document your group members' experience and they yours. Your shared experience. We do have a platform that I'm going to speak about in 1 second about how you can share those images. Document the landscape. What plants are out? Is it willow season? What colors are those plants? These kind of small details really give your story a sense of place and time. When is this happening? Oh, it's happening when the fireweed is this in bloom. Like it really gives us a sense of time. Essentially, this is bear season towards the end of bear season. This is bear season towards the beginning of, when they're just coming off the ice in late summer. It changes so drastically. You might come across other wildlife in the field, and that is wonderful. Keep your eyes out. The more you can help look for wildlife, the more the group is going to benefit. So it might be a red fox, driving down the tundra, an Arctic fox. Look out for any kind of interesting wildlife that you will see. This is likely going to be one of the few times in your life where you're out in the subarctic tundra. It's a beautiful place. So I wish you very, very great journeys. I think even something as simple as the murals in town, or the character of the town itself, it's so fascinating. So I'll bring you now to the photo portal. One of the things I love that NatHab does is every program that they do, they have a photo portal. And it's essentially in your greater portal, there's a place where you can upload, it's called the photo share, where you can upload your images that you've taken on the trip. You go to your trip, you find photo share, you then add, you create your own album, and you add images to that album. And then every other group member in that trip can do the same. They can see your images, and you can see their images. You share the story, essentially. And so when you look at the images, sorry, this is from the Amazon program, but when you look at the images, you see a gallery of images that everyone has taken in one spot. And it becomes a much easier way to share images compared to email, for example. So I'm going to end it here with 6 minutes left. This is wonderful. For me, what's coming up next is Churchill. I leave tomorrow, and I will be there for 6 programs. I hope to see you there. If you have any random photography questions, please don't hesitate to ask. At the end of polar bear season, I'm going to do a visual review of the entire season. So photograph highlights from the year. Excuse me, from the season, and that will be after November 16th, and then I'll be back up in Churchill for Northern Lights season. So I will end there, lead into questions, and thank you very much.
Julia, thank you so much. All right, everybody, before we dive into those questions, please feel free to submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. It's on the upper right-hand corner. Just click on those 3 lines and go down to the question field when it opens up, and that's where we'll live. All right, so do you recommend having a camera lens weather cover for being outside? Is that something that's necessary?
So I recommend your lens hood. Definitely bring your lens hood. In terms of the camera cover, I've seen photographers come in with they're almost like sheaths that you would put your camera in if it's raining, for example. There's range and durability and price. That's always a good thing to have in your camera bag. But I would say for the most part, you will be on a rover when we're out in the the tundra, and the rover is going to be covered unless you go to the back. And so largely your camera is well protected, but I don't think it's a bad idea to have something in your camera bag should you want to be out in the back of the rover, or for other circumstances. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily necessary. Definitely bring your lens hood. It will prevent stray raindrops, for example, if there are snowdrops.
Gotcha. Thanks for the advice. What about a polarizer? Is that something that you would recommend using?
Oh, that's a great question. Some photographers will use it to kind of cut the reflection or glare off the snow. I've seen people do both, and that would be personal preference. I've seen, I don't use it, for example, myself, and I'm content with my images. One thing I'm thinking about doing is a neutral density filter and doing kind of creative images with half inside the rover, half out, and using the neutral density filter to help me there. But the polarizer, I think that's a personal choice. I don't think it's necessary. If you don't have one, for example, I don't think you'd be lost without one. But if you are used to using it and it's part of your regular practice, then definitely bring.
So is it possible for me to download my pictures from my camera right onto an external hard drive without a computer in between? Is there a way to do that?
Not that I know of. No, I think you need a computer in between. Yeah. From my understanding is if you're on a photo trip, your photo guides will all have computers. If you didn't want to bring your own, like if I had a guest who wanted to back up their images, I'd happily lend them my computer. But I don't think there's as far as I know, there's not an easy, inexpensive go between. I think there might be some devices that you could purchase that will allow you to do that, but not anything that I can think of at the moment.
Gotcha. Thanks, Julia. Well, thank you so much for the cell phone specific part of this. People were really excited about that, but they want to know what your cell phone is. What do you use?
Oh, good question. So I have an Android, I think it's the S22. It's pretty great. I do like the Android. I'm a PC person. I like that I have more compatibility there. I will say I also work on expedition ships where we do, 150 guests. They're mostly using their cell phones. And some of the best pictures I've seen have come out of the S24 in terms of quality. But you also see a range. You have a lot of very, very happy iPhone users. And I think ultimately whatever camera you have, as long as you understand how to use it, you're practicing with it, you're going to get great pictures.
Gotcha. Thank you, Julia. Well, that is the last question that we have today, but we have so many comments from people who were so excited by this presentation. They wanted me to thank you directly, so thank you for this. It was really wonderful. Wow comes up a lot, and brilliant presentation, and you've been such a great teacher, so thank you for taking the time to present this for us today. Do you have any closing comments you want to share?
Well, thank you for that. That was really sweet. But for everyone who's heading up to Churchill, whether this year or next year or later, I really hope you have a wonderful trip. It will be an incredible experience, and I hope you really enjoy yourself. Please reach out. I'd love to see some pictures after the season. Thank you guys so much.
Julia, thank you so much. This was terrific. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel to Churchill and take pictures of polar bears, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll say goodbye. So long. We'll see you next time.